This is a little bit of a maintenance tutorial on the gas shocks that are underneath these units, which are controlled by the reclining levers. When you pull the reclining lever, you're basically pulling on this gas shock, and there's a pin on the end here, and when you pull on it, it's going to expand itself. So you can actually see that this gas shock has gone out. If this pin is held in for any reason, then when your customer's sitting in the chair, it's going to drift back by itself, similar to this. You're going to say, well, Jesus always wants to drift back, what can I do about it? And it's a simple adjustment, and underneath the chair, on this particular gas shock, if the pin is being held in all the time, it's always going to recline. On these gas shocks that are underneath the chair right here, you can see that there's this lever, and that's hooked up to the reclining mechanism bar here. On the older, we've upgraded years back from a lighter rod, the guys were bending, to a triple strength rod underneath here, so that there's no way they can bend these. And I'm not too sure how they were bending the old ones, but the first thing you always want to check is make sure that this rod isn't bent on you, because if this rod is bent, then actually what you've done is you have taken and reduced the distance from the front, from the back here, where this rod is fixed, to the front. And what now happens is that this pin in here is being held in all the time. And whenever you hold this pin in, at any point, this gas shock is going to move either in or out, because that says release it and let it move. So what happens is these guys bend these rods, it shortens the distance, you're holding the pin in, and the chair is always going to be reclining. So you want to make sure your rod is straight. And I don't know how they bend them all the time, but they won't bend the new ones, because the new one, as you can see, is like 3 times thicker. So you want to make sure everything is bent back into shape, and then you want to check this gap in here. You can do that by laying the chair on its side. So what we're going to do is we're going to adjust this gas shock in this housing. First, we're going to make sure everything is straight on all these parts. Underneath, make sure that this L rod is straight. And then we're going to do is what's happened here is we've lost this air gap between this paddle that pushes on the pin on the end of the cylinder and the pin. So you have to have an air space. If you don't, you're going to be holding this pin in, and whenever you hold that pin in, it's going to recline. That pin is the key. You got to have a little air space between this paddle that's going to push on this and this pin. And if this was out of adjustment, if this chair was out of adjustment, we would want a little bit more air space. And it's very simple to do. You don't have to take the gas shock out or anything. You have to loosen the nut, which always has to be tight. And what we're going to do is we're going to screw it all the way up the shaft till we run out of threads. Now, we're going to turn the entire shaft. The gas shock won't move, but we're going to turn the shaft one full turn to unscrew it out of the housing. And when we do that, it's going to create a bigger airspace between the pin and the paddle. Because when the chair was reclining by itself, it wasn't being told to not recline because the pin was being held in. Now when we're done moving the shaft outward, we need to screw this back in, and we need to lock it up. Because if you don't, over time, this shaft will screw itself into that housing. If this is loose, every time you use the chair, over a year or two, this thing will be screwing itself into you lose that airspace, which might be your original problem right now, that it got loose somehow. So then you tighten it up, and when you take a reclining lever and you move it, you can actually feel the airspace, and then you can feel the pin. So you feel the gap of the airspace, and then you can feel the pin. And whenever you hold the pin in, it's going to recline. Whenever you don't hold it in, it's going to stop. If you see oil dripping off of your gas shock and it's reclining, then typically your gas shock will need to be replaced. But 95% of the time, it's usually just an adjustment. Very rare do these gas shocks go unless the chair is like 5 or 7 or 8 years old.